At 6:18 a.m. on a perfect Thursday morning in French Polynesia's most exclusive resort, a housekeeper's scream shattered the tranquility of paradise. The sound carried across the turquoise lagoon, bouncing between overwater bungalows where honeymooners slept peacefully, unaware that one of the most disturbing crime scenes in the island's history was being discovered just meters away. "There's blood everywhere," the housekeeper whispered into her radio, her voice trembling. "The bathroom, madam, is not moving." What happened in that $2,000 per night overwater bungalow would expose a web of deception, forbidden romance, and the deadly consequences of betrayal that not even the pristine waters of Bora Bora could wash away. This is the story of Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez and the paradise honeymoon that became her final destination. The St. Regis Bora Bora Resort represents the pinnacle of tropical luxury. Celebrities, billionaires, and royalty choose its exclusive overwater bungalows for privacy, opulence, and the unparalleled beauty of French Polynesia's turquoise lagoon. Bungalow 17, situated at the end of the resort's northern pontoon, offered the most secluded experience, perfect for newlyweds seeking romance and intimacy. On May 15, 2024, this paradise became a crime scene when the body of Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez, 27, was discovered in the marble bathroom of her honeymoon suite. The Filipino nurse lay crumpled against the custom bathtub, her body bearing evidence of a brutal attack that forensic investigators would later describe as a rage-filled assault. Her head had suffered massive trauma, her arms and hands covered with defensive wounds, and blood spatter analysis indicated she had fought desperately for her life. Resort security immediately secured the scene while local authorities were contacted. French Polynesian Special Investigator Matthew Laurent arrived by police boat just 42 minutes after the initial call. With 20 years of experience investigating violent crimes across the Pacific Islands, Laurent had seen the dark side of paradise before. But as he would later tell reporters, this was different. The contrast between this perfect setting and the savagery of the crime was jarring. You could still see her honeymoon champagne on ice while her blood stained the imported Italian marble. The victim's husband, Officer Faisal Al-Nahyan, 32, a decorated member of Dubai Police's elite division, was nowhere to be found. Resort staff reported he had approached the front desk at 5:47 a.m., his voice unnaturally calm as he reported his wife missing. "My wife went for an early swim and hasn't returned," he told them. "I'm concerned." Security footage would later show Faisal returning alone to the bungalow at 1:23 a.m., though he claimed they had both returned from dinner together around 11 p.m. What investigators found most disturbing were the items missing from the scene. Isabelle's phone and personal diary were nowhere to be found, though her passport, wallet, and other valuables remained untouched. More telling was the discovery of a blood-stained hotel bathrobe partially submerged in the lagoon, just 15 meters from the bungalow's private deck. When questioned about this, Faisal suggested perhaps his wife had gone for a pre-dawn swim and encountered trouble. The temperature in his voice never changed, even as he identified his wife's body. "His emotional response was completely inappropriate," said Dr. Sophia Benoit, the forensic psychologist who observed the identification. "There was no shock, no grief, just a clinical detachment that immediately raised red flags. What comes next will shake your faith in the institution of marriage itself." The honeymoon murder shocked 3 continents. In the Philippines, Isabelle's family reacted with disbelief and horror. In Dubai, the Al-Nahyan family immediately deployed legal teams and diplomatic pressure. And in French Polynesia, paradise lost its innocence as tourists wondered how such violence could invade their tropical fantasies. Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez had been a rising star at Dubai's American hospital. Colleagues described her as dedicated, brilliant, and unfailingly kind. She had moved from Manila 5 years earlier, part of the wave of Filipino healthcare professionals sought by Gulf states for their expertise and work ethic. The eldest of 4 siblings, Isabelle sent a significant portion of her salary home each month to help her parents put her younger brothers and sister through school. Her mother, Corazon Mahinay, worked as a seamstress in Manila's Tanda district. Her father, Eduardo Alvarez, drove a jeepney to support the family. "Isabelle was our miracle," Corazon would later tell investigators through tears. From childhood, she was determined to lift our family from poverty. Even when she began dating this wealthy man, she never forgot us. Her last message to me was about paying for my cataract surgery. That wealthy man, Faisal Al Nahyan, came from a different world entirely. The son of retired General Ahmed Al Nahyan, Faisal had been raised in Dubai's elite circles. Educated at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in England before joining Dubai's police force, he had risen quickly through the ranks, his father's connections smoothing his path to the prestigious elite division that protected the Emirates' ruling family and visiting dignitaries. Colleagues described Faisal as disciplined, ambitious, and intensely private. He never spoke much about his personal life, said Lieutenant Mahmoud Al-Farsi, who had worked with Faisal for 3 years. We knew he dated occasionally, but the engagement announcement came as a complete surprise. Even more surprising was that he had chosen someone outside our cultural circle. The whirlwind romance had begun just 7 months before their marriage. The couple had been married for exactly 11 days when Isabelle's body was discovered in that luxurious bathroom thousands of miles from home. What had transformed their fairy tale into a nightmare? What had happened in that bungalow during the early morning hours of May 15th? The answers would emerge through an investigation spanning multiple countries, revealing layers of deception that no one could have imagined. As investigators began the painstaking process of collecting evidence, disturbing details emerged about the final days of Isabelle's life. Resort staff recalled the couple arriving 3 days earlier, Faisal attentive and charming in public, Isabelle seemingly happy though unusually quiet. But on the evening before the murder, other guests had reported hearing a heated argument from Bungalow 17. One witness, honeymooning in the adjacent bungalow, reported hearing a woman crying, followed by what sounded like furniture being overturned. I almost called security, Dr. Marcus Stevenson told investigators. But then everything went quiet, and I convinced myself it was just a temporary disagreement. I'll have to live with that decision for the rest of my life. The question that haunted investigators from the beginning was simple yet profound. What could transform a honeymoon in paradise into a brutal murder in less than 72 hours? The answer, as we'll discover, begins with a chance meeting in a Dubai hospital corridor and ends with the ultimate betrayal. Dubai's American Hospital, November 14, 2023. Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez was halfway through a 12-hour shift in the pediatric intensive care unit when she first encountered Faisal Al Nahyan. Their eyes met over the counter, and for a brief moment, Isabelle forgot the exhaustion of her double shift. There was something electric about that first meeting. Marina Villanueva, Isabelle's closest friend and fellow nurse, would later recall. Isabelle called me that night and spent 20 minutes describing his eyes, his voice, the way he carried himself. I'd never heard her talk about a man like that before. Faisal was investigating a case involving suspected child abuse. The son of a wealthy expatriate family who had been brought in with injuries inconsistent with the parents' explanation. As the assigned officer, he was methodical, thorough, and surprisingly gentle when interviewing the frightened child. Isabelle observed these interactions from a professional distance but found herself impressed by his combination of authority and compassion. What began as professional consultation evolved quickly. The next day, Faisal returned with unnecessary follow-up questions that could have been handled by phone. The day after that, he appeared with coffee for the nursing staff, though he made sure to hand Isabelle's cup directly to her, their fingers brushing momentarily. By the end of the week, a massive arrangement of orchids arrived at the nurse's station with a card requesting her company for dinner. It was like a movie, said Dr. Anita Kapoor, who witnessed the courtship unfold. This handsome officer in uniform pursuing the beautiful nurse. We were all a little jealous, to be honest, especially when the gifts started arriving. Those gifts became increasingly lavish. A Hermes scarf after their first dinner at Atlantis Oceano Underwater Restaurant. A Cartier bracelet to celebrate 1 month of dating. Christian Louboutin shoes delivered to the hospital on random Tuesdays, just because. For Isabelle, who had grown up counting every peso, this extravagance was both thrilling and uncomfortable. She kept telling him it was too much, Marina explained, but he insisted that making her happy brought him joy. "Let me do this," he would say. "You deserve beautiful things." What woman could resist that? The warning signs were there from the beginning, but in the glow of new love, they were all too easy to dismiss. The cultural differences that seemed charming at first gradually revealed deeper complications. When Isabelle brought Faisal to dinner with her Filipino friends, he was polite but visibly uncomfortable with their boisterous laughter and casual physical affection. When she wore a cocktail dress he considered too revealing to a hospital function, his jaw tightened and he draped his jacket over her shoulders in a gesture that seemed protective but felt possessive. He started suggesting changes, Marina recalled. First it was her clothes. More modest, more expensive. Then it was her friends. Maybe spend less time with people from the hospital. Then her hours. Couldn't she transfer to a department with more regular shifts? Each suggestion came wrapped in concern for her well-being, making it difficult to recognize the pattern of isolation being established. Isabelle's social media presence transformed during those months. Her Instagram, once filled with nurse friends at brunches and patient success stories, with faces blurred for privacy, shifted to showcase luxury experiences. Dinner at Burj Khalifa's at Mosphere restaurant, weekend getaways to Oman's Six Senses Zygi Bay, helicopter tours above the Palm. Each photo perfectly composed, each caption expressing gratitude for her incredible blessing in finding Faisal. Behind those carefully filtered images, however, the relationship was developing concerning dynamics. Phone records would later show Faisal calling Isabelle multiple times during her shifts, text messages questioning her whereabouts when responses were delayed by even 15 minutes. Location sharing was, for safety, continuous contact, because he missed her. The proposal came just 4 months after their first meeting at Burj Al Arab's underwater restaurant Al Mahara. Faisal had arranged a private dining experience, the entire restaurant closed to other guests. The aquarium's blue glow illuminating tears in Isabelle's eyes as he presented a custom-designed 4-carat diamond ring from Graf. "Of course I will," she whispered as he slid the ring onto her finger. The restaurant staff, positioned discreetly around the perimeter, erupted in applause. A photographer Faisal had hired captured the moment for Instagram perfection. Isabelle called her family immediately, holding up the ring to her phone camera as her parents and siblings gathered around their modest family television in Manila to witness her joy through a video call. Her mother wiped away tears while her father looked both proud and concerned. "Are you sure, Anak?" Eduardo asked gently in Tagalog. "You've known him such a short time. When you know, Papa," Isabelle responded with the confidence of the newly engaged. "He's everything I've dreamed of." In Dubai, the reaction to their engagement was considerably cooler. Faisal's family, particularly his father General Ahmed Al Nahyan, received the news with barely disguised disapproval. The Al Nahyan family had maintained their position in Dubai's elite circles through carefully cultivated relationships and strategic marriages. A Filipino nurse, regardless of her intelligence and beauty, was not part of those strategies. "You could have any woman from the finest families," General Al Nahyan told his son during a tense family dinner that Isabelle later described to Marina. "Why choose someone who doesn't understand our traditions, our obligations?" Faisal's response was uncharacteristically defiant. "Because I love her. Because she sees me, not my family name or connections. Because I'm tired of the games and politics of our social circle." The engagement moved forward despite these tensions, with wedding plans accelerating at a pace that left everyone breathless. Isabelle had imagined a long engagement, perhaps a year to plan properly and give her family time to save for travel to Dubai. Faisal had other ideas, securing a date just 3 months away at the prestigious Jumeirah Beach Hotel. "We don't need to wait," he insisted. "When you find your destiny, you don't hesitate." This intensity both flattered and concerned Isabelle. During a rare girls' night with Marina, one that Faisal had reluctantly approved after multiple calls confirming exactly who would be present, Isabelle confessed her first serious doubts. "Sometimes I feel like I can't catch my breath," she admitted over mocktails at a rooftop bar. "Everything is moving so fast, and he's so certain about everything. When I suggested waiting a bit longer before the wedding, he looked at me like I'd slapped him." "Marina," who had been harboring concerns for weeks, saw an opening. "Belle, is he always this controlling? About your time, your clothes, your decisions?" Isabelle stared into her drink for a long moment. "It's not control, it's protection. He worries about me. And it's different in his culture. Men are supposed to take care of everything." She looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Besides, what woman wouldn't want to be treated like a princess? What Isabelle didn't share, even with Marina, was the incident that had occurred the previous weekend. During a dinner with Faisal's police colleagues, she had laughed too loudly at a joke told by his superior officer. In the car afterward, Faisal's knuckles had turned white on the steering wheel. "You embarrassed me," he said, voice deadly quiet. "You were flirting with him." "I was just being friendly," Isabelle protested. "I was laughing at his joke, not—" The rest of her words were cut off as Faisal's hand closed around her wrist, squeezing until she gasped in pain. "You are mine," he said, still looking straight ahead at the road. "Don't ever forget that." Later that night, he had apologized with tears in his eyes, bringing her breakfast in bed the next morning with a Van Cleef and Arpels bracelet nestled beside the orange juice. "I don't know what came over me," he whispered. "It will never happen again. I just love you so much it makes me crazy sometimes." Isabelle accepted the apology and the bracelet, convincing herself it was an isolated incident born from stress and cultural differences. She didn't notice the pattern forming. Tension, explosion, lavish apology, peaceful period, then tension building again. She didn't recognize this cycle had a name: domestic abuse. Meanwhile, as wedding plans accelerated, another woman was watching the public Instagram posts with increasing desperation. Marina, a 29-year-old Emirates flight attendant, had been Faisal's girlfriend for 3 years. She had her own key to an apartment he maintained in Dubai Marina, where they spent her days off between international flights. Marina had accepted Faisal's explanation that their relationship needed to remain secret due to his family's expectations and his career. She had patiently waited for him to find the courage to introduce her to his family. Now, scrolling through Isabelle's joyful engagement posts, Marina felt her world collapsing. The calls to Faisal went unanswered. The apartment key suddenly didn't work. Her existence had been erased without even the courtesy of an explanation. When wedding invitations circulated among Dubai's elite in March 2024, Marina received news through mutual friends rather than directly. The beautiful cards, edged in real gold leaf, announced the union of Officer Faisal Ahmed Al Nahyan and Ms. Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez at the Jumeirah Beach Hotel on April 28, 2024. Marina's hands shook as she booked a flight to Bangkok, scheduling herself to be far from Dubai on the wedding day. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this flight would save her life, keeping her away from the tragedy that was already set in motion. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship isn't when things are at their worst. It's when the victim finally discovers the truth and prepares to leave. In the next segment, we'll reveal how the elaborate facade of a perfect marriage crumbled during what should have been the happiest time in Isabelle's life, and the shocking discovery she made that sealed her fate in paradise. The wedding of Officer Faisal Ahmed Al Nahyan and Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez on April 28, 2024, was exactly what Dubai society expected. Extravagant, meticulous, and designed to impress. The $500,000 ceremony at Jumeirah Beach Hotel's Royal Ballroom featured 10,000 white orchids flown in from Thailand, a 7-tier cake adorned with edible gold leaf, and a guest list that included government ministers, police commissioners, and the city's social elite. What it lacked, according to those closest to the bride, was authentic joy. Isabelle looked stunning in her custom Elie Saab gown, said Lucia Mahinay, her younger sister who had flown in from Manila for the wedding. But there was something in her eyes that worried me. A hollowness, like she was watching herself from a distance. The Mahinay family, Isabelle's parents and 3 siblings, arrived in Dubai 3 days before the ceremony, their flights and accommodations arranged by Faisal. They were installed in a luxury suite at the address downtown, with scheduled activities and a driver at their disposal. What they didn't have was time alone with Isabelle. Every time we tried to have a private conversation, Faisal would appear, Lucia later told investigators. Always smiling, always polite, but always there. The one time I managed to get Isabelle alone in the hotel spa, she kept checking her phone nervously. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said, "Everything's perfect." Why wouldn't it be? The wedding ceremony blended Filipino Catholic traditions with Muslim customs in an elaborate performance of cultural fusion. Isabelle had insisted on incorporating the traditional Filipino veil, cord, and coin ceremonies, symbols of unity and prosperity that had been part of her family's weddings for generations. Faisal had agreed, though his father's tight expression during these unfamiliar rituals was noted by several guests. "It was like watching two planets trying to orbit the same sun," commented Father Miguel Santos, the Filipino priest who conducted the Catholic portion of the ceremony before the Islamic officiants took over. You could feel the tension between the families, despite everyone's best efforts. The reception featured performances by both an Emirati traditional dance group and Filipino singers flown in from Manila. Speeches were given in 3 languages: Arabic, English, and Tagalog. Isabelle's father, Eduardo, speaking through an interpreter, thanked the Alnayan family for welcoming his daughter and expressed hope that the union would bring both families closer despite the distance between their homes. General Ahmed Alnayan's response was polite but reserved. "We welcome Isabelle into our family and traditions," he said, noticeably emphasizing the latter word. "We trust she will honor our customs and bring pride to the Alnayan name." The warning signs were multiplying, and what happened after the guests departed would set the stage for tragedy. The wedding night was spent in the presidential suite of the Armani Hotel in Burj Khalifa. At 3:42 a.m., hotel security received a call from a guest in a neighboring suite reporting concerning sounds from the newlyweds' room. The security log, obtained later by investigators, noted, responded to guest complaint about possible disturbance in presidential suite. Upon arrival, Officer Alnayan answered door, apologized for noise, explained they had knocked over a glass table during celebration, observed broken glass and female guest, Mrs. Alnayan, in bedroom area. All appeared in order, though Mrs. Alnayan did not approach door. What security didn't record was that Isabelle remained in the bedroom because her lip was bleeding and bruises were already forming on her arms. The celebration had been Faisal's rage after finding a text message from a male nurse congratulating Isabelle on her marriage. The broken glass table resulted from Isabelle being pushed against it during the ensuing confrontation. The next morning, when Lucia met her sister for a post-wedding brunch, she immediately noticed Isabelle's swollen lip. "What happened?" Lucia asked when they had a moment alone in the restaurant's powder room. "I bit it accidentally," Isabelle replied, avoiding her sister's eyes in the mirror as she applied another layer of concealer. "Too much champagne, I guess." Lucia wasn't convinced. "Belle, you can tell me if something's wrong. You know that, right?" Isabelle's response was a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's perfect. I'm just tired from all the excitement." The makeup artist hired for post-wedding photographs noted in her diary that evening, "Had to use extra product on Mrs. Alnayan today to cover what looked like finger bruises on both wrists and arms. Bride seemed withdrawn, husband extremely attentive, wouldn't leave during makeup session. Uncomfortable vibe." The honeymoon had been planned for mid-May, giving Faisal time to complete an important security assignment before their departure. Isabelle had initially suggested visiting the Philippines so her new husband could see her homeland, perhaps combining it with a trip to Palawan's beautiful beaches. Faisal had other ideas. "Bora Bora is the ultimate honeymoon destination," he told her, showing her pictures of the St. Regis Resort's overwater bungalows. "Nothing but the best for my wife." The planning was handled entirely by Faisal, first-class Emirates flights to Los Angeles, connecting to Air Tahiti Nui to Papeete, then a private charter to Bora Bora. The most exclusive overwater bungalow was booked for a 10-day stay, along with private excursions, couple spa treatments, and sunset dinner cruises. The total cost, approximately $75,000, a sum that made Isabelle uncomfortable despite her new husband's wealth. "It's too much," she protested during one of their rare moments alone in their new apartment, a 4,000-square-foot penthouse in Dubai Marina that Faisal had purchased without consulting her. "Nothing is too much for my wife," he replied, kissing her forehead in the condescending manner that had become his habit. Besides, I want to show you off in paradise. The weeks between the wedding and honeymoon were marked by increasing isolation. Isabelle had resigned from her nursing position as Faisal had insisted, claiming that his wife shouldn't need to work. Her friends reported that she became increasingly difficult to reach, her social media posts less frequent and showing only carefully curated glimpses of her new life. What no one knew, what would only be discovered after her death, was that Isabelle had begun keeping a secret diary, hidden in a false bottom she created in her jewelry box. The entries, recovered by investigators, painted a disturbing picture of life behind the penthouse's closed doors. April 30th. Second time this week. Always where it won't show, stomach, back of legs. Always followed by tears, gifts, promises. I don't know who he is anymore, or who I am. May 3rd. He installed something on my phone. Says it's for my safety. Checks my location constantly. Calls to make sure I'm where I say I am. What happened to trust? May 7th. Met Marina for coffee. My only connection to my old life. Had to pretend I was shopping for honeymoon clothes. If he knew I was seeing anyone from the hospital, he would explode again. The most chilling entry came just 3 days before their departure for Bora Bora. May 9th. Found something strange today. A key to an apartment in Marina, lease agreement in his name. Payments going back 3 years. Who is MH and why is he paying her rent? Need to investigate more when he's at work tomorrow. What Isabelle discovered on May 10th would seal her fate, though she didn't know it yet. While Faisal was at police headquarters, she used the key she had found to visit the mystery apartment in Dubai Marina, just 5 buildings away from their own penthouse. The space was clearly lived in. Women's clothes in the closet, cosmetics in the bathroom, framed photos throughout. Photos of her husband with another woman. Intimate photos spanning years, including some dated just weeks before their wedding. The woman was beautiful in an exotic way, long dark hair, olive skin, flight attendant uniform in several pictures. On the refrigerator, a magnetic notepad held a shopping list in feminine handwriting signed, "Love you. See you after Bangkok RM." Isabelle spent 2 hours in the apartment, methodically photographing everything with her phone. She found credit card statements showing jewelry purchases identical to unique pieces Faisal had given her. She discovered a drawer of lingerie with attached gift cards. To my eternal love, Marina. Most damning was a folder of travel documents showing vacations they had taken together during the same period he had been courting her. Their entire relationship had been a lie. The honeymoon from hell was about to begin, and Isabelle had no idea she had just started the countdown to her own murder. Isabelle left the apartment exactly as she had found it, returned to the penthouse, and replaced the key in Faisal's drawer. When he returned home that evening, she greeted him with a practiced smile and mentioned her excitement about their upcoming honeymoon. That night, she sent an email to her sister Lucia from a new account she had created, isabellemahinay.private@gmail.com. The email contained all the photos from the apartment and a simple message. If anything happens to me, it was Faisal. He's been living a double life. I'm going to confront him in Bora Bora where he can't walk away from the conversation. I'll call you after. Love you all. Lucia received the email but didn't see it for days. It had gone to her spam folder, where it would remain until investigators asked the family to check all possible communications after Isabelle's death. By then, it would be too late. On May 12, 2024, Isabelle and Faisal departed Dubai International Airport for their honeymoon, her carrying a terrible secret, him unaware that his deception had been discovered. Airport security footage, reviewed later by investigators, shows a tense-looking Isabelle checking her phone repeatedly while Faisal handled their check-in. At one point, she steps away to make a brief call. Phone records would show this 3-minute call was to Marina Villanueva. She was terrified, Marina told investigators. She said she had discovered something horrible about Faisal, that their entire marriage was based on lies. I begged her to come to my apartment instead of going on the honeymoon, but she insisted she needed answers from him first. She said she'd handle it carefully, in public where he couldn't react badly. Those were her exact words. where he couldn't react badly. She knew he was dangerous. What neither woman realized was that Isabelle's discovery had already triggered a chain of events that would end in her death. The apartment's security system had sent an automated alert to Faisal's phone when the door was opened that afternoon. The system's camera had captured images of Isabelle methodically documenting his secret life. By the time they boarded their flight to Los Angeles, Faisal knew that she knew. He just hadn't decided what to do about it yet. The St. Regis Bora Bora resort exists in a different reality from ordinary life. Celebrities like Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, Justin Bieber, and various members of Middle Eastern royal families have all sought its exclusive luxury. Arriving guests are transported by private boat from the airport, welcomed with fresh flower leis and chilled champagne, then whisked to overwater bungalows that start at $1,200 per night. The royal estate, where the Al Nahyans were booked, costs $20,000 per night in peak season, offering 13,000 square feet of privacy with its own beach access, private pool, and butler service. When Isabelle and Faisal arrived on May 13, 2024, they were greeted as VIP guests, the police insignia on Faisal's passport ensuring special attention from security staff. Resort footage, later examined by investigators, shows the couple's arrival. Faisal smiling confidently, one hand firmly gripping Isabelle's elbow. Isabelle's smile tight and fixed, her eyes scanning their surroundings as if memorizing escape routes. They seemed like any other honeymoon couple at first glance, said Thomas Lefevre, the resort manager who personally escorted them to their bungalow. But something felt off. Usually, couples can't keep their hands off each other during check-in, stealing kisses, giggling. These two were performing, he overly attentive, she oddly formal. I've worked in luxury hospitality for 15 years. You develop a sense for genuine versus artificial. The first day passed without incident. The couple had lunch at the resort's lagoon restaurant, took a short swim in the private pool, and ordered room service for dinner. Security footage shows them retiring to the bungalow at approximately 9:30 p.m., with no further movement recorded until morning. Day 2 began with what appeared to be normalcy. Breakfast on their private deck, a couple's massage at the Iridium Spa at 11 a.m., followed by a scheduled private snorkeling tour around the island. It was during this excursion that another guest captured the only known photo of Isabelle alive in Bora Bora. A background figure in a tourist selfie, her expression unreadable behind oversized sunglasses, Faisal's hand visibly gripping her upper arm. The lady seemed sad. Kylie Hua, their snorkeling guide, later told police. The gentleman was very controlling, always answering questions for her, interrupting when she tried to speak. When I helped her into the boat, I noticed bruises on her back where her swimsuit shifted. Not fresh ones, older yellow ones. Made me uncomfortable, but what could I do? These wealthy clients, they live by different rules. That evening, the facade began to crack. The couple had dinner reservations at the resort's premier restaurant, Lagoon by Jean Georges. Halfway through the meal, another guest reported hearing raised voices, followed by Isabelle abruptly leaving the table. Faisal paid the bill immediately and followed her out. He wasn't running, but walking with purpose, said James Wilkins, a honeymooning American seated nearby. His face was completely calm, which made it more disturbing somehow, like he was thinking through a problem rather than concerned about his upset wife. Resort security cameras tracked their movement back to the bungalow. Isabelle entered first, Faisal following approximately 45 seconds later. Within minutes, resort staff received a noise complaint from neighboring guests. The gentleman called the front desk, said night manager Hyeri Tiha. He apologized for the noise, explaining they were having an argument about dinner plans for the next day. He assured us everything was fine and asked not to be disturbed for the remainder of the evening. We respected his privacy. In retrospect, that was our fatal mistake. If the signs of danger were becoming increasingly obvious, why didn't anyone intervene? The truth is, luxury resorts operate on a principle of absolute discretion. High-profile clients expect their privacy to be protected at all costs. While paradise was unraveling for Isabelle, another drama was unfolding 11,800 kilometers away in Dubai. Marina, Faisal's girlfriend of 3 years, had returned from her Bangkok flight to discover her key no longer worked in the apartment door. When she called Faisal's personal phone, the number was disconnected. Her text messages went unanswered. It was as if 3 years of her life had been erased without explanation. What Marina didn't know was that Faisal had been alerted to Isabelle's discovery of the apartment. His solution was coldly efficient. Cut off all contact with Marina, change the locks, and destroy any connection that could verify Isabelle's suspicions. But he hadn't counted on Marina's determination or her connections within Emirates Airlines. "I knew something was wrong," Marina later testified. "This wasn't just a breakup. Faisal and I had discussed marriage. We had plans. For him to disappear completely wasn't just unusual, it was alarming." Using her airline credentials, Marina accessed passenger manifests and discovered Faisal's booking to French Polynesia with a woman listed as Mrs. Isabelle Al-Nayan. A quick social media search revealed wedding photos posted just days earlier. "I felt physically ill," Marina recalled. 3 years of my life, promises of marriage, plans for children, all while he was dating, proposing to, and marrying another woman. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious. Marina's next actions would prove crucial to the investigation that followed. She emailed Isabelle directly, attaching photos of herself with Faisal dating back years, bank statements showing his payments for the apartment, even screenshots of text messages where he had discussed leaving Isabelle after the honeymoon. "She deserved to know the truth," Marina explained. "I didn't wish her harm, I wished her escape. No woman should live with such deception." The email was sent on May 14th at 10:14 p.m. Dubai time, 4:14 p.m. in Bora Bora. Whether Isabelle saw this email before her death remains uncertain. What is clear from phone records is that at 4:37 p.m., Isabelle attempted to call her sister Lucia. The call didn't connect due to poor reception in the overwater bungalow. The final day of Isabelle's life, May 15th, 2024, has been meticulously reconstructed by investigators through security footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence. The morning began normally enough. The couple had breakfast delivered at 8:30 a.m., though the server noted that Madame barely touched her food and seemed to avoid eye contact with both her husband and staff. At 10 a.m., they attended a scheduled couples massage at the resort's Iridium Spa. The massage therapist, Hayata Techuanui, later provided critical testimony. The woman had bruises on her back, sides, and upper arms in various stages of healing, Hayata stated. When I asked if she wanted different pressure in those areas, her husband answered for her, saying she had fallen while snorkeling. But these were not fresh injuries, and they didn't look like falling injuries. They looked like fingerprints and grab marks. Most telling was a whispered exchange Hayata overheard when she briefly left the room to retrieve warm towels. Though the words were muffled, she clearly heard Isabelle say, "I know about Marina," followed by Faisal's sharp, "We will discuss this later." At 1 p.m., the couple boarded a private charter boat for a planned 3-hour tour around the island. Captain Philippe Masson reported that they positioned themselves on opposite sides of the vessel and barely spoke throughout the excursion. "The tension was palpable," Captain Masson said. At one point, Madame asked to be returned to the resort early, claiming she felt unwell. Monsieur insisted they complete the full tour as scheduled. She didn't argue further. They returned to the resort at 4:15 p.m. Security footage shows them walking separately to their bungalow. Faisal several paces behind Isabelle, his expression unreadable. They entered the bungalow and would not be seen together again on any resort cameras. At 7:30 p.m., room service delivered a champagne dinner to the bungalow. The server, Meva Tahani, reported hearing raised voices from inside, but was unable to distinguish words. When Faisal answered the door, he appeared composed but insisted on taking the cart himself rather than allowing Meva to enter and set up as was customary. "He gave me a large tip and practically closed the door in my face," Meva recalled. "I remember thinking it was strange because I could see the lady sitting on the deck with her back to the door, very still like a statue." This was the last confirmed sighting of Isabelle alive. What happened between 7:30 p.m. and the discovery of Isabelle's body the next morning has been reconstructed through forensic evidence and partial audio captured by Isabelle's Apple Watch. which was found damaged but still functional in the bungalow's bedroom. The watch recorded fragments of conversation beginning at 9:17 p.m. Isabelle saw the apartment. I know everything about you and Marina. Faisal. Unintelligible. Isabelle. 3 years? Our entire relationship was a lie? While you were buying me gifts, you were buying the exact same things for her. Faisal. Lower your voice. You're being hysterical. Isabelle. I'm leaving tomorrow. I want an annulment. I've already contacted my sister. The recording becomes unintelligible for approximately 2 minutes. Then captures. Faisal. Not going anywhere. You're my wife now. Isabelle. I'll tell everyone what you've done. Your father, your commanders at the police. The audio cuts out again, resuming at 9:26 p.m. Isabelle. Get away from me. Don't touch me. The sound of breaking glass is followed by a scream. Then the recording ends. Forensic analysis indicates the confrontation escalated quickly after this point. The crime scene told a story of extreme violence. Blood spatter patterns consistent with multiple impacts, defensive wounds on Isabelle's arms and hands, and the primary attack occurring in the bathroom where Isabelle had apparently tried to barricade herself. The pattern of injuries suggests she was conscious and fighting back for several minutes, said Dr. Antoine Mercier, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy. The fatal wound was caused by blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, likely from impact against the marble vanity edge, but she suffered multiple strikes before that. Most disturbing was evidence that Faisal made no attempt to get help after the attack. Instead, security footage shows him leaving the bungalow at 10:42 p.m., returning at 11:17 p.m. with wet clothing. Investigators believe he used this time to dispose of Isabelle's phone and diary in the lagoon, items that were later recovered by dive teams. For nearly 6 hours, Faisal remained in the bungalow with his wife's body. At 5:47 a.m., he approached the front desk, reporting with remarkable calm that his wife had gone for an early swim and hadn't returned. He seemed concerned but not panicked, said night manager Hyeri Itiha. He asked us to check the beach and surrounding areas, suggesting she might have fallen or become disoriented in the dark. Resort security began a search while Faisal returned to the bungalow, allegedly to wait for news. It was during this search that the housekeeper, arriving for morning turn-down service, discovered Isabelle's body in the bathroom. Faisal's performance of concern collapsed under questioning. When confronted with the physical evidence and timeline discrepancies, he claimed Isabelle had attacked him in jealous rage over imagined infidelities, forcing him to defend himself. This narrative disintegrated when Marina came forward with 3 years of evidence documenting their relationship. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just Faisal's double life or even his violence. It was his complete lack of remorse. When formally charged with Isabelle's murder, his only recorded concern was whether he could access his bank accounts while in custody. This case would eventually span 3 continents, involving international diplomatic negotiations, extradition battles, and a trial that captivated global media. But at its heart was a simple, devastating truth. Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez died because she discovered her husband's lies and dared to claim her freedom. The evidence trail spans from Bora Bora to Dubai to Manila, revealing how digital breadcrumbs can speak for victims who can no longer speak for themselves. The death of a Filipino nurse at a luxury resort in French Polynesia triggered an investigative response that crossed oceans, cultures, and jurisdictional boundaries. Within hours of Isabelle's body being discovered, the case had escalated beyond local authorities to involve Interpol, the Dubai Police Force's Internal Affairs Division, and the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs. The investigation that followed would expose not just a murder, but an international web of privilege that nearly allowed a killer to escape justice. Matthew Laurent, senior investigator for the French Polynesian Special Crimes Unit, had 20 years of experience with violent deaths in paradise. Tourist destinations like Bora Bora maintain a carefully crafted image of perfection, and Laurent had seen firsthand how quickly local officials could be pressured to minimize publicity around crimes involving wealthy visitors. My first challenge wasn't finding evidence, Laurent later explained in an exclusive interview. It was preventing evidence from disappearing. The moment I learned the suspect was a Dubai police officer from a prominent family, I knew powerful forces would mobilize to protect him. Lawrence's instincts proved correct. Just 3 hours after Isabelle's body was discovered, before forensic teams had even completed their initial documentation, the Emirati consulate in Papeete contacted French Polynesian authorities. The diplomatic representative requested immediate consular access to Faisal and questioned the legal basis for his detention. They didn't ask about the victim or express shock at the crime, Laurent recalled. Their first concern was protecting their citizen and removing him from our jurisdiction. Faisal's performance during initial questioning revealed a man accustomed to authority rather than accountability. Security footage from the interrogation room shows him sitting calmly, posture relaxed, responding to questions with practiced precision. He maintained unwavering eye contact with investigators, a behavior that body language experts would later identify as an intimidation technique rather than a sign of honesty. My wife and I had an argument about dinner plans, Faisal stated, his voice steady. She became hysterical, throwing things, accusing me of infidelity. When I tried to calm her, she slipped in the bathroom and hit her head on the vanity. I tried to help her, but it was too late. This narrative might have gained traction if not for the extensive physical evidence contradicting every aspect of his story. Dr. Elise Morin, the forensic pathologist who conducted the preliminary examination at the scene, identified multiple impact points inconsistent with a single fall. The victim sustained a minimum of 7 distinct blows to the head, face, and upper body, Dr. Morin reported. The pattern and angle of injuries indicate she was facing her attacker, then attempting to protect herself with raised arms, before the final fatal impact to the back of the skull. This is not consistent with an accidental fall. This is a prolonged assault. Most damning was the timeline established through resort security footage, which showed Faisal leaving the bungalow at 10:42 p.m., returning wet at 11:17 p.m., then waiting nearly 6 hours before reporting his wife missing. When confronted with this discrepancy, Faisal claimed he had gone for a swim to clear his head after finding his wife's body, then returned and waited in shock before seeking help. It's among the weakest alibis I've encountered in 2 decades of homicide investigations, Laurent stated. He claimed emotional distress prevented him from immediately reporting her death, yet security footage shows him methodically cleaning the crime scene, disposing of evidence in the lagoon, and even ordering room service at 2 a.m. The evidence that ultimately exposed Faisal's premeditation will leave you stunned at how digital breadcrumbs can speak for victims who can no longer speak for themselves. While Faisal was being questioned in Bora Bora, a parallel investigation was unfolding 14,000 kilometers away in Dubai. Detective Fatima Al-Mazroui of the Dubai Police Internal Affairs Division had received notification that one of their officers was implicated in a foreign homicide. Standard protocol required a cursory review of Faisal's service record and personal background to provide context to international authorities. What Detective Al-Mazroui discovered instead was troubling evidence of a pattern of misconduct that had been repeatedly buried by supervisors. 3 female suspects had filed excessive force complaints against Faisal in the past 5 years. All 3 complaints had been dismissed after intervention from his father, General Ahmed Al-Nayan. 2 female colleagues had requested transfers away from his unit, citing uncomfortable working conditions, but declining to provide specific details when pressed. It was like watching dominoes fall, Detective Al-Mazroui later testified. Once I began looking, the pattern became unmistakable. Officer Al-Nayan had a history of controlling and aggressive behavior toward women, but his family connections had shielded him from consequences. The most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marina, Faisal's longtime girlfriend, contacted Dubai police after learning of Isabelle's death through media reports. Initially terrified of potential retaliation from the Al-Nayan family, Marina found courage in her horror at what Faisal had done. I could have been her, Marina told investigators, her voice shaking during the recorded interview. The same controlling behavior, the same rage when questioned, the same threats when I tried to leave him. The only difference is I wasn't legally trapped by marriage. Marina provided investigators with 3 years of evidence. Photographs, gifts, travel records, and most significantly, text messages documenting Faisal's volatile behavior. The messages revealed not just his double life, but a calculated plan to marry Isabelle for her family connections to hospital administration while maintaining his relationship with Marina. He told me the marriage was just for appearance, Marina explained, showing investigators messages where Faisal had outlined his plan. His father was pressuring him to marry someone suitable, and Isabelle had connections that could help his sister access experimental medical treatment in the Philippines. He said after a year, he would divorce Isabelle with a settlement and we could be together officially. The text messages Marina provided proved crucial to establishing premeditation. 2 weeks before the honeymoon, Faisal had written, "She's becoming suspicious, keeps asking questions about late-night calls. If she discovers us, everything falls apart. I can't let that happen." Another message, sent just days before the Bora Bora trip, was even more incriminating. "The honeymoon will resolve everything. Isolated bungalow, deep water underneath. Problems can disappear in paradise. Then it's just you and me as we planned." Meanwhile, in Manila, Isabelle's family was fighting their own battle against bureaucratic indifference. The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs initially classified the case as a private matter rather than a diplomatic priority. It took the intervention of Senator Maria Gonzalez, who had worked with Isabelle's mother as a young woman, to elevate the government's response. "This is not just about one Filipino citizen," Senator Gonzalez declared in a press conference that catapulted the case into international headlines. "This is about whether the life of an overseas Filipino worker is valued equally to the life of a wealthy foreigner. This is about whether justice can prevail against money and influence." The senator's advocacy mobilized Filipino communities worldwide. Within days, the hashtag Justice for Isabelle was trending globally. Vigils were held outside UAE embassies in Manila, London, New York, and Toronto. The pressure forced both the Philippine and UAE governments to commit publicly to a transparent investigation. Back in Bora Bora, the physical evidence was mounting against Faisal. Dive teams recovered Isabelle's phone from the lagoon near the bungalow. Though water damaged, digital forensics experts were able to extract crucial data, including photographs Isabelle had taken of Marina's apartment, the draft email to her sister, and her final Google searches, "How to safely leave abusive husband," and "Emergency divorce international marriage." The phone also revealed something investigators hadn't anticipated. Isabelle had been recording audio using her phone's voice memo function during the final confrontation. The recovered audio, though fragmented, captured Faisal's uncontrolled rage when confronted about his infidelity. "You think you can threaten me?" His voice snarls on the recording. "No one leaves me. No one. I decide when it's over." Isabelle's voice, remarkably calm given the circumstances, responds, "I have copies of everything. Marina, the apartment, the messages. I've already sent them to my family." The recording ends with sounds of a struggle and Isabelle's scream. This evidence transformed the case from circumstantial to conclusive, but a critical challenge remained: jurisdiction. The Alnayan family was leveraging considerable influence to have Faisal extradited to the UAE, where his family connections could ensure a more favorable outcome. French Polynesia, a territory of France, found itself under diplomatic pressure from both the UAE and the Philippines, each demanding priority in the legal proceedings. The solution came through Interpol's coordination of a joint prosecution agreement. The murder had occurred in French territory, giving France primary jurisdiction. However, the agreement allowed for the participation of both Filipino and Emirati prosecutors, with the understanding that any sentence would be recognized by all three countries. "It was unprecedented," explained international law expert Dr. Sophie Lambert. "Three legal systems with very different approaches to criminal justice had to find common ground. The fact they succeeded demonstrates the global significance this case had acquired." The legal breakthrough coincided with a forensic one. Investigators discovered a custom Montblanc pen in the bungalow's bedroom, a wedding gift from Faisal's father engraved with the family crest. Initial processing had catalogued it as a personal effect, but closer examination revealed microscopic blood spatter in the cap mechanism. DNA testing confirmed it was Isabelle's blood. "The pen was the smoking gun," Laurent explained. It had been used to stab her neck during the initial attack, explaining the unusual puncture wound that didn't match any surface in the bathroom. It transformed our understanding of the assault from rage-induced to something more deliberate. The final piece of evidence that sealed Faisal's fate came from Isabelle herself. Beyond the grave. The Apple Watch she had been wearing, though damaged in the struggle, contained health data that precisely tracked her heart rate during the attack. The data showed her heart racing from approximately 85 beats per minute to over 170 within seconds, remaining elevated for approximately 7 minutes before showing rhythms consistent with severe trauma. Then nothing. This digital evidence directly contradicted Faisal's claim of a single accidental fall, instead confirming the pathologist's assessment of a prolonged assault. More significantly, it established a precise timeline that matched the recovered audio fragments and resort security footage. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the Al Nahyan family changed tactics. General Ahmed Al Nahyan arrived in Papeete with a team of attorneys and a proposal. A financial settlement of $5 million to Isabelle's family in exchange for their support of a reduced charge of manslaughter rather than premeditated murder. The response from Eduardo Alvarez, Isabelle's father, was immediate and unequivocal. Standing outside the modest Manila home where Isabelle had grown up, he addressed reporters with quiet dignity. "My daughter's life cannot be purchased," he said, his voice steady despite his grief. "We did not raise her to become a negotiation. We raised her to help others as a nurse. Now, in her death, she will help others by showing that justice cannot be bought, not even by billionaires." The rejection of the settlement offer transformed the case from a private tragedy to a symbol of class warfare. Editorials worldwide praised the Alvarez family's integrity, while condemning the Al Nahyan approach as emblematic of wealth inequality in the justice system. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict long before the actual trial would begin. As the investigation phase concluded, investigators across 3 countries had assembled a comprehensive picture of a murder that had been weeks in the making. Faisal hadn't snapped in a moment of rage. He had methodically eliminated a problem when his deception was exposed. The evidence trail stretched from Dubai to Bora Bora to Manila, digital breadcrumbs combining with physical evidence to speak for a victim who could no longer speak for herself. On June 30, 2024, exactly 46 days after Isabelle's murder, formal charges were filed against Faisal Al Nahyan. First-degree murder with premeditation, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. The stage was set for one of the most closely watched international trials of the decade, a case that would test whether justice could truly be blind to wealth, power, and privilege. The trial of Faisal Al Nahyan began on September 17, 2024, in Papeete, Tahiti, under extraordinary security measures. The courthouse, a colonial-era building overlooking the harbor, was surrounded by barricades, with armed guards positioned on neighboring rooftops. Inside, the gallery was divided into sections allocated to international media, diplomatic observers, and family representatives from both sides. The Alvarez family, Eduardo, Corazon, Lucia, and Isabelle's 2 younger brothers, sat together in the front row, dressed in matching white shirts embroidered with Isabelle's name in traditional Filipino script. Across the aisle, General Ahmed Al Nahyan occupied his section alone, his military bearing undiminished by the circumstances, his expression carefully neutral. The contrast between the families was striking, noted CNN legal correspondent Samantha Waters. The Alvarez side, supporting each other physically and emotionally, occasionally weeping together. The Al Nahyan side, represented solely by the general, rigid and isolated, never displaying emotion even during the most graphic testimony. Presiding Judge Francois Moreau opened proceedings by acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the case. "We gather here under the laws of France, but with respect for the traditions and interests of all nations involved. Justice transcends borders, wealth, and status. In this courtroom, all are equal before the law." The prosecution team, led by Elise Dupont from the French Polynesian District Attorney's Office, was flanked by Filipino prosecutor Manuel Santos and Emirati Representative Amina Al-Suwaidi. Their collaborative approach represented a remarkable diplomatic achievement, though observers noted Al-Suwaidi's noticeably less aggressive stance compared to her colleagues. She was in an impossible position, explained international law expert Dr. Pierre Dubois. As an Emirati prosecutor, she was obligated to pursue justice, but as a citizen of a hierarchical society, confronting a powerful family like the Al Nahyans could have permanent career implications. The defense strategy emerged quickly. Faisal's legal team, headed by renowned French attorney Jean-Pierre Lacroix, would argue for a heat-of-passion defense, claiming that Isabelle's accusations about Marina had provoked a temporary mental break, reducing the charge from premeditated murder to voluntary manslaughter. "My client acknowledges the tragic outcome of this confrontation," Lacroix stated in his opening remarks. But what occurred was not the calculated act the prosecution describes. It was the desperate response of a man whose honor and reputation were suddenly threatened by false accusations from his wife. This narrative collapsed during the first day of evidence presentation, as Prosecutor Dupont methodically walked the court through the digital trail, revealing Faisal's premeditation. Text messages to Marina, Google searches for undetectable poisons and diving accidents Bora Bora, and his systematic efforts to conceal evidence all pointed to calculation rather than temporary passion. The testimony that follows will reveal how the smallest details of digital evidence can expose a killer's true intentions, no matter how carefully they attempt to hide them. The prosecution's case was built on a foundation of forensic evidence presented through expert witnesses. Dr. Elise Morin walked the court through the autopsy findings, using anatomical diagrams to illustrate the pattern of injuries that definitively disproved Faisal's claim of a single accidental fall. The victim sustained a defensive wound pattern typical of someone trying to protect themselves from repeated attacks. Dr. Morin testified, pointing to injuries on Isabelle's forearms and hands. The final fatal injury to the posterior skull could only have occurred after she was already incapacitated from earlier blows. Digital forensics expert Jean-Claude Bisset presented the recovered data from Isabelle's phone and Apple Watch, creating a precise timeline of the attack that aligned perfectly with resort security footage and witness testimony. The courtroom fell silent as Bisset played the recovered audio fragments of Isabelle's final moments, her voice remarkably calm as she confronted Faisal, followed by the sounds of struggle and her final scream. Not even the most experienced journalists were left unmoved, wrote Philippine Daily Inquirer reporter Maria Santos. General Al Nahyan's expression remained unchanged, but several jurors openly wept. Perhaps the most devastating testimony came from Marina, who traveled from Dubai despite reported threats against her family. Dressed conservatively in a black suit, her hands visibly shaking as she took the oath, Marina provided the missing context that explained Faisal's motive. "He told me the marriage was just for appearance," she testified, avoiding looking at Faisal. "He said his father was forcing him to marry someone appropriate, but that I was his true love. He promised to divorce Isabelle after a year, once he had secured connections to her hospital network for his sister's treatment." Marina described a 3-year relationship, marked by increasing control and occasional violence. "When I threatened to leave him once, he grabbed me by the throat and said no one leaves him, ever. He decided when relationships ended, not the other way around." The defense team's cross-examination attempted to portray Marina as a scorned lover seeking revenge, but her testimony remained consistent. When asked why she had come forward despite the risks, her answer was simple and powerful. "Because it could have been me in that bathtub. Because her family deserves the truth. Because Isabelle deserved to live." The most unexpected development came on day 7 of the trial, when Faisal insisted on testifying in his own defense against his attorney's advice. Taking the stand in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression appropriately somber, he presented a performance designed to humanize him to the jury. "I loved my wife," he began, his voice catching slightly. "What happened in Bora Bora was a tragedy I will regret for the rest of my life. But it was not murder. It was a terrible accident during an emotional argument." This carefully constructed narrative unraveled during cross-examination by Prosecutor Dupont, who methodically walked Faisal through the timeline established by physical and digital evidence. His composure cracked when presented with the recovered voice recording of Isabelle's final moments. "That recording has been altered," he insisted, his voice rising. "She attacked me. She threatened my reputation, my career. She wanted to destroy everything I had built. And so you destroyed her instead, DuPont responded calmly. The courtroom fell silent. Faisal's mask of controlled grief slipped, revealing a flash of the rage that had killed Isabelle. It lasted only seconds, but the jury had seen it. The defense attorneys immediately requested a recess, but the damage was irreparable. After 12 days of testimony, the case went to the jury, a panel of 7 individuals selected from French Polynesian citizens with no connections to the tourism industry or international law enforcement. They deliberated for just 9 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Judge Moreau scheduled sentencing for October 15th, allowing time for victim impact statements from Isabelle's family and colleagues. The statements, delivered over 2 emotional days, painted a portrait of a woman whose compassion had touched countless lives. My daughter left our small neighborhood in Manila to heal people around the world, Eduardo Alvarez said, his voice steady despite his grief. She believed in a world where kindness mattered more than money or power. The system that failed to protect her must now deliver the justice she deserves. Corazon Mahinay spoke directly to Faisal. You took my firstborn child, the one who helped raise her siblings, who sent money home for her brother's education, who called me every Sunday without fail. You did not just kill Isabelle. You shattered our family's heart. Perhaps most powerful was the statement from Dr. Anita Kapoor, Isabelle's supervisor at Dubai American Hospital. In the pediatric ICU, we measure success in lives saved, in children who leave our care healthier than when they arrived. Isabelle saved 347 children during her time with us. That's 347 futures that exist because of her skills and dedication. What comparable contribution can her killer claim? The defense presented character witnesses attesting to Faisal's professional accomplishments and family connections, but their impact seemed negligible compared to the portrait of Isabelle that had emerged. General Al-Nayan declined the opportunity to speak on his son's behalf, his expression unreadable as he sat rigidly in the gallery. On October 15, 2024, Judge Moreau delivered his sentence: life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 22 years. In his remarks, he addressed the international dimensions of the case directly. This court recognizes that no punishment can restore what has been lost. No sentence can return Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez to her family or to the patients who would have benefited from her care. But justice demands a response proportional to both the crime itself and the calculated attempts to escape accountability. The evidence reveals not merely an act of violence, but a fundamental belief that wealth, power, and connections should shield one from consequences. Today's sentence affirms that no one, regardless of family name, profession, or financial resources, stands above the law. Our in-depth analysis of similar cases reveals how often the wealthy nearly escape accountability, and the heroic legal professionals who ensure they don't. The aftermath of the trial extended far beyond the courtroom. In Dubai, the police force underwent a comprehensive review of internal complaint procedures, with particular attention to how family connections might influence disciplinary actions. Detective Fatima Almazroui, whose thorough investigation had uncovered Faisal's history of misconduct, was promoted to head a new domestic violence response unit despite reported opposition from certain high-ranking officials. In the Philippines, Isabelle's case catalyzed significant policy changes. The Department of Foreign Affairs established the Overseas Filipino Worker Protection Task Force, with enhanced resources for responding to crimes against Filipino citizens abroad. Isabelle's law, passed 6 months after the verdict, strengthened pre-departure counseling for Filipinos entering international marriages, including information about legal rights across different jurisdictions. In French Polynesia, luxury resorts implemented new staff training protocols focused on recognizing signs of domestic violence among guests. The St. Regis Bora Bora established an annual scholarship in Isabelle's name, funding nursing education for young Polynesian students. The Alvarez family used part of their eventual civil settlement, negotiated separately after the criminal trial, to establish the Isabelle Mahinay Foundation, providing educational support for Filipino nurses and resources for domestic violence prevention. The foundation's first project was a free clinic in Manila's Tondo district, where Isabelle had grown up. "We are transforming our grief into purpose," Lucia explained during the clinic's opening ceremony. My sister's dream was to provide health care to communities like ours. Through this foundation, her work continues even after her death. Marina returned to Dubai despite concerns for her safety, eventually publishing a memoir titled The Other Woman, My Life with a Killer, which became an international bestseller. She devoted a significant portion of the proceeds to domestic violence prevention programs across the Middle East, focusing particularly on expatriate communities where women might have limited legal protections or family support. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved Isabelle by coming forward sooner, Marina said in an interview promoting the book. The least I can do now is help other women recognize the warning signs I missed or ignored. General Ahmed Al-Nahyan resigned from his military position shortly after his son's sentencing, retreating from public life to the family's compound outside Abu Dhabi. Sources within Emirati government circles suggested the case had significantly diminished the Al-Nahyan family's once considerable influence, with younger members struggling to distance themselves from the scandal. Faisal Al-Nahyan was transferred to a maximum security prison in metropolitan France, where he would serve his sentence far from the privileges and connections he had exploited throughout his life. His appeals were systematically rejected by higher courts, with each ruling reaffirming the strength of the evidence and appropriateness of the sentence. 3 years after Isabelle's murder, her case continues to resonate in discussions about domestic violence, international justice, and the privileges of wealth. Legal textbooks cite the prosecution as a model of international cooperation, while domestic violence advocates reference the case when discussing how abusers can appear charming and accomplished in public while becoming monstrous behind closed doors. On the anniversary of Isabelle's death each year, nurses at Dubai American Hospital wear purple ribbons, the international symbol for domestic violence awareness, with Isabelle's name embroidered in gold thread. In Manila, her family lights candles around her photograph, still prominently displayed in their living room. In Bora Bora, resort staff place flowers on the lagoon where she spent her final days. The tragedy of Isabelle's story isn't just how it ended, reflected Matthew Loran, the investigator who first responded to the scene. It's how preventable it was. The warning signs were there in Faisal's professional record, in the pattern of controlling behavior, in the previous incidents that were dismissed or minimized. A different response at any of those points might have saved her life. This case forces us to examine uncomfortable questions about how we respond to domestic violence across cultural and economic boundaries. When does controlling behavior become dangerous? How do wealth and status influence accountability? What responsibilities do witnesses have when they observe concerning dynamics in a relationship? Isabelle Mahinay Alvarez traveled from Manila to Dubai to Bora Bora, pursuing dreams of professional success and romantic love. Her journey ended in a luxury bungalow designed for perfect honeymoons, her blood-staining imported Italian marble as her husband calculated how to conceal his crime. But through the dedicated work of investigators, prosecutors, and witnesses who refuse to be silenced, her story continues to create meaningful change. If this investigation has left you questioning the warning signs of dangerous relationships or the influence of privilege in justice systems, you're not alone. The comments section is filled with viewers sharing their own experiences and observations. Join the conversation and let us know. What signs of control or manipulation do you think are most often dismissed as romance or cultural differences? What changes would make the justice system more equitable regardless of wealth or status? Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell because next week we're examining another case that challenges everything you think you know about trust and betrayal. The story of a celebrated philanthropist whose secret life as a predator was hidden behind millions in charitable donations. Behind every perfect social media post, every lavish vacation photo, every couple goals image, there may be a completely different reality. The most dangerous people often appear the most charming in public. The question isn't whether warning signs exist. It's whether we're willing to see them before it's too late. Thank you for watching.